This is the third of 4 segments discussing home regulatory waivers and statutory suspensions issued by HUD in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. If you've accessed this recording from the HUD Exchange, the other segments of the short series can be accessed from the same page. If you're watching this from YouTube directly, there are links in the description below the video to the other segments, as well as to other related HUD resources. In the prior segment, we covered waivers and suspensions of regular home program requirements that were extended beyond September 30th of 2021. In this portion, we're talking about the waivers and suspensions that expired at the end of September 2021. So as of October 1st, these requirements were back in place. Those include suspensions and waivers related to the 10% limit on administrative funding, the CHOTO set-aside and provisions for CHOTO operating assistance, the 9-month sales deadline, income documentation, and provisions related to workouts for home projects within their home affordability periods. While we won't go into detail on it, there was also a waiver allowing PJs to reduce the public notice and comment period for substantial amendments to their action plans to as little as 5 days, which has now also expired. I'll also note here that all of the waivers and suspensions related to emergency home tenant-based rental assistance also expired at the end of September, so regular home requirements for TBRA apply to all home assistance provided on or after October 1st, 2021. We'll cover emergency TBRA more specifically in the fourth and final segment of our conversation. HUD recognizes that in practice, the home statute's 10% cap on administrative funding rarely covers all of the costs that a PJ incurs in overseeing and implementing its programs. In April of 2020, in response to the pandemic and its anticipated effects on state and local budgets, HUD issued a suspension and waiver that allowed home PJs to increase the cap on administrative funding to as much as 25%. These waivers were specific to the home allocations from FY 2019 and FY 2020. They were not extended and do not apply to a PJ's 2021 home allocation. As PJs transition back to normal, they should review the status of their overall admin funding. If your PJ elected this waiver, have you used those additional admin funds at this point? If not, do you still expect to? Or do you need to transfer remaining administrative funds back into project funding, or what we'd refer to in IDIS as the EN or entitlement portion of your allocation? If a PJ has fully obligated those funds and is still struggling to address its administrative cost, it may want to consider shifting some of its cost to project soft cost, or what we sometimes refer to as project delivery cost, as allowed for in Section 92-206D6 of the regulation. Similarly, PJs who aren't doing so may want to begin charging annual monitoring fees to home-assisted rental projects. If your PJ is thinking about or already doing this, be sure to review Homebuyer's Volume 14, Number 2, which we've linked in the description section below the video for those of you watching this directly in YouTube. The April 2020 memo also provided 2 suspensions and waivers related to CHOTOs. The first allowed a PJ to reduce or even eliminate its CHOTO set-aside from home allocations from FY 2017 through FY 2020. This was intended to give PJs flexibility in moving funds between activity types as they responded to the pandemic. The second waiver increased the cap on CHOTO operating assistance, allowing PJs to allocate up to 10% of their FY 19 and FY 2020 allocations to CHOTO operating, twice the normal 5% cap. This waiver allowed PJs to invest more in a given CHOTO as well, removing the standard cap limiting such assistance to the greater of $50,000 or 50% of the CHOTO's operating budget. Both of these waivers are now expired and did not apply to FY 21 home allocations. So for the PJs listening, 15% of your 2021 allocation was automatically placed in the CHOTO reserve, and you're capped at using no more than 5% of your allocation for CHOTO operating if that's an activity you choose to fund. So as PJs look ahead, they need to evaluate how the pandemic has affected their local CHOTO partners. If you've been funding CHOTO operating, you may need to continue to do so. And if your PJ has not elected to use home funds in this way, you might need to consider adding it to your program mix at this time. Ultimately, CHOTOs are still an important part of the home program and an important partner in delivering assistance at the local level. PJs need their CHOTOs to be viable and vibrant in order to successfully invest funding from the set-aside. We would also remind PJs that Home ARP has a provision allowing operating assistance to nonprofits, which may include your CHOTOs, who are otherwise expected to receive Home ARP funding. Again, Home ARP is not the focus of our conversation today and has significant differences from regular home. But many of our CHOTOs are likely to be partnering with their PJs in both versions of the home program moving forward.
The Home Final Rule requires homebuyer units developed with home funding to be sold or under a ratified sales contract within 9 months of construction completion. In consideration of potential difficulties in viewing and delays in purchasing homes during the pandemic, HUD provided a waiver that delayed any deadlines occurring within the waiver period until September 30th, 2021. This waiver was not extended and has expired. For sale properties that do not meet this deadline are subject either to repayment of the home funds or conversion to home-assisted rental units. Please be aware that lease purchase arrangements made after this deadline do not qualify as conversion to rental. While PJs may not want to repay the home funds, converting for sale units to rental requires re-underwriting the project to rental standards, revising the home written agreement to reflect the changes, and possibly transferring the property to an owner that can provide appropriate rental management. It will require the PJ to monitor the project for rental period of affordability, which can be as long as 20 years if newly constructed. So when all the requirements are taken into account, PJs may find repayment of the home funds to be the preferable alternative. That would free the unit for sale or use outside of the home program and home restrictions. Finally, watch the HUD Exchange for additional resources on unsold units. There will be video presentation, such as this one, a checklist on considerations for conversion, and tools that can help PJs to plan future sales of converted rental units to the existing tenant under 92.255 of the Home Final Rule. To accommodate the challenges of in-person meetings and assembling and conveying backup documentation during the pandemic, HUD had waived the regulatory requirement for 2 months of source documentation and temporarily permitted PJs to accept self-certifications of income from low-income applicants for both assisted rental housing and TBRA assistance. This was not extended. Consequently, since September 30th, 2021, PJs and their partners should be complying with home program requirements to collect and verify income for all home rental and TBRA activities for initial certifications and recertifications as specified in 92.203. That includes rental income certifications and the recertifications at least every 6th year of the period of affordability, as well as the TBRA initial certification and the annual recertification. Please note that homebuyer and homeowner income qualifications and source documentation requirements were never waived. PJs should make efforts to remind all of their rental and TBRA partners that the rental certification and documentation requirements are again in effect. Under one of the previous COVID waivers, HUD had permitted a PJ to make additional home funds available to a home rental project for a short-term operating deficit reserve to respond to pandemic conditions. If the PJ had elected this waiver, it could fund the reserve without having to seek HUD approval and enter into an MOU with HUD under Section 92.210 of the Final Rule. This waiver expired at the end of September 2021. If a PJ had elected to use this waiver for any of its projects, the waiver required the PJ to reconcile the operating reserves drawn to the actual operating deficit that occurred during this period and to require the owner to repay any unused reserve funds or funds that were not properly used. This reconciliation is required to be completed within 6 months from the expiration of the waiver or March 30th, 2022. Now that the waiver has expired, workouts for home rental projects within their existing period of affordability must now follow the provisions of 92.210. HUD recognizes that some rental projects may continue to experience financial difficulties related to the pandemic, and PJs may propose longer-term workouts to HUD. However, under 92.210, the proposed workout will need to be sufficient to ensure the viability of the project for at least the period of affordability, and also the PJ will need to oversee the project's ongoing financial condition from an asset management perspective, including monitoring loan status, account balances, reserves, management performance, and other such aspects of overall project viability.